Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Capitola City Council meeting. We're very happy that you're here tonight, and thank you those who are watching at home, and thank you those who email us and call us and write us. And please don't be shy about calling us. Also, all of our telephone numbers are listed on the Channel 8 on the scroll, or you can get them from Linda, our receptionist at City Hall, if you want to talk about something. I think that's the best way to communicate, but people are shy to call us at home, and please don't feel shy. Please call us when you want to talk about something. The first item is roll call, please.
Councilmember Norton. Here. Councilmember Story.
Here.
Councilmember Bottorff.
Here.
Councilmember Termini.
Here.
Mayor Harlan.
Here. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is Karen here? Karen Nevis. When she comes in, I have a proclamation for her, but otherwise we'll go right ahead to the first item and Mr. City Manager Jamie Goldstein.
Sure, going to get it.
Oh, never mind. She's that there? Okay.
Maybe she wants it outside. Get into an airplane.
Hi, Bruce. No, I've got my glasses. Hi, Karen. Welcome. Welcome. We are so happy that you're here tonight. You want to come and stand here with me? So we'll be on camera together. Karen turn around, we'll face this way. Karen is a friend and a neighbor, and I'm so proud of her artwork, and she's a very famous artist also, and she's been in town for a long time, participates in open studios, and if you get a chance, go to her home to view all of her wonderful artwork during open studios. But we've been fortunate enough to know Karen as a previous owner of the Boat and Bait Shop and the launching business out at the wharf many years ago, and when Ernie ran it, and used to go deep sea fishing and diving, and used to bring my roommate and I abalone at that time when abalone was plentiful. That's what I remember, when Ernie had a crush on my housemate. So, you know, we have lots of interesting stories to tell here in Capitola. And one of them is that Karen also served on the Arts Commission for 10 years. And we really appreciate that. Really appreciate having someone with long-time Capitola experience, a wonderful eye, wonderful knowledge about what works and what doesn't, because we've tried a number of different art shows and art events and different things here for holidays and different events. And so we really appreciate her invaluable service and want to give her this token of our thanks. We can't thank her enough. And everyone say welcome to her and give her a chance to say a few words about anything that was memorable about your business out on the wharf or on the Arts Commission. If there's anything interesting out there.
Thank you, Stephanie, and everyone here. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to serve on the Art Commission. My life on the wharf is sort of a past life. It was a long time ago now, but I did that for 14 years. But I currently work as a watercolor artist, and that's what my passion is. And being on the Art Commission, I must say it was one of my very favorite volunteer positions I've ever done. And I enjoyed working with every single commissioner on there, and still will continue to help and be involved where I can. So I just really want to say what a joy that is, and a great part of my life. And thank you very much for this award. I was really delighted that you did this.
Thank you. Please continue to volunteer, because we'd love to see you around and helping out with Begonia Festival or Art and Wine and the Sundays and whatever you can fit into your busy schedule. Thank you very much, and congratulations. Mr. Jamie.
Council members, it's with great pleasure this evening that I would like to introduce you to our new Community Development Director, Rich Grenell. I'll invite Rich up to the podium. We'll embarrass him a little bit here. Rich comes to us from San Diego and has more than 14 years of experience working for public entities throughout the state. He was most previously the land use chief for San Diego County, in charge of entitling all sorts of controversial and difficult projects, from master plan communities all the way down to complex mixed use and commercial projects. Before going to San Diego County, Rich worked for the city of San Diego as well as Encinitas and Solano Beach. Rich is a native of Michigan, and he got his BS in environmental science and natural resource policy studies from the University of Michigan. So I'm really happy to announce Rich. I think he's going to be a terrific fit here in the city and be with us for a long time to come. So welcome, Rich. Thank you. And with that, I think our city clerk is going to administer the oath of office.
Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Rich Grunow,
I, Rich Grunow,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
the duties of which I'm about to enter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, and if you'd like to say a few words to us in the audience, we'd love it.
I'm delighted to have the opportunity to work for the citizens of such a charming community. It's really an exciting opportunity, and I look forward to working with Jamie, all the city staff, and implementing all the policies and priorities of this council and its appointed officials.
Thanks.
You do realize we invented the term tempest in a teapot. I hope you... Did you internalize that before you accepted the job?
It's funny you said that. When I first met Jamie, I think he used that phrase 2 or 3 times at least. It's been ringing around
Forewarned
in my
is
head
forearmed.
since.
Good
Yeah.
one.
So.
Stephanie?
Yes, Dennis.
Rich, you may look at this community as being progressive. You will learn differently. This community is exactly the same as it was 35 years ago. Nothing ever changes here.
Right.
And so that is your job.
Well, that gives it part of its charm, I'm sure. Right.
Charm is one word we've heard used to describe it.
That's right.
You're a lucky person to be here, and we welcome you with open arms. And if there's anything we can do to help in this transition and help you to get to know the community, please call upon any of us at any time.
I agree. I'm very lucky, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, presentation from the Capitola Public Safety Foundation. Good evening, Bruce and Chief. This is Bruce Arthur, the president of the Capitola Community Foundation, Safety Foundation.
I don't have to talk then. You just took half my speech away. Yeah, and you're correct.
And former council member and former mayor and longtime servant of the city with all of us.
And that's all correct. 8 years ago, in 2005, the Capitola Public Safety and Community Service Foundation was incorporated. Part of our, I've got 2 presentations to make. This will be the first one. Part of our mission is to promote public safety by providing resources and support for, and I'm sorry I have to read this, but there's so many I had to boil it down and to remember them all. The Police Department's Reserve Police Officer Program, Problem-Oriented Policing, that's the POP program, which includes bicycle patrols, specialized training and equipment needs, educational materials, and expansion of the Neighborhood Watch program. The Police Department's Volunteers and Police Service, the VIPS, and the Explorer Cadet program. And I believe we have a number of VIPs here tonight, and I'd like them to stand and be recognized. these people, whenever there's an event, are immeasurable as far as their contributions to making those events happen and supporting the police and everything they do. And we thank you for your involvement. Also, the police department's elder care task force and vacation check programs, where people can call in if they're going on vacation. And the police, if you're not aware of it, that program, you just call the police department and let them know that you're going on vacation, and they will check your property. The police department's commercial security program, merchant alert program, and community outreach facility and other outreach programs. Juvenile and school outreach programs and initiatives including the after-school programs, mentoring, bicycle safety, and gang resistance education. And of course, my favorite, and a lot of people's, is the police department's canine program, and we'll talk about that in a second. We fund all of our programs through donations from the public and events like our annual Capitola Rod and Custom Car Show, which is coming up the first weekend in June, and our Safety Foundation Golf Tournament, which anybody is encouraged to enter and play. You don't even need to keep score. So, one of our first major accomplishments, one of the first programs that we really got behind and spent a lot of money on, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but it cost a lot of money at the time, was the K-9 program. And that was to purchase Damien, the K-9 officer. I guess you'd call him an officer. Unfortunately, I think everyone knows a couple of months ago, Damien suffered a stroke, which is extreme. I didn't realize dogs had strokes, but Damien suffered a stroke and had to be retired. Now, through an awful lot of hard work and research, Chief Escalante has found a provider of canines that provides canines for military, personal use, and throughout the country. So, in a savings of scale, was able to find and procure an officer at a reasonable price. To that end, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Safety Foundation, I would like to present the Chief with a check for $3,500 that will pay for the training, the post-mandated training for the dog. Just in the spirit of full disclosure, Chief Escalante is also the Vice President of the board, and during the vote on the funds for the dog, he recused himself. And I'm told that the new, if no one knows, the new dog's name is, I guess, appropriate, I'm told. His name's Ruckus. Yeah, and he's out on the he's out on the street now, so we're all being protected. On a much more somber note, I think we're all realized that a few weeks ago, the law enforcement community was rocked by a horrible tragedy. The death of Officers Butch Baker and Elizabeth Butler in Santa Cruz. Immediately after the event, I challenged the board to support the educational fund set up for the children of the fallen officers. I was blown away by the response. It was overwhelming. With the inclusion of 2 citizens of Capitola, plus the board, and then a matching amount from the foundation's general fund, we were able to raise $3,000. Chief, I would be honored if you would present this to Butch's wife, Kelly.
So I'm going to ask Kelly Baker and Butch's son Adam to join me up here so that I can present this check to them for the Butler and Baker Foundation, and may God be with you both. And there you are.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The next item is a report on the closed session by Attorney John Barasoni.
Thank you, Mayor Harlan. The items that the council discussed in closed session this evening are those listed on the council's posted agenda. With regard to property negotiations involving McGregor Drive, specifically the Soquel Creek Water District's acquisition of a portion of that parcel to build a pump station, the city manager provided the council with an update on the negotiations for that property acquisition, and the council gave Mr. Goldstein directions with regard to the ongoing negotiations, but took no reportable action in closed session. The council received a status report from Assistant City Attorney Adair Paterno regarding the ongoing Schrodel litigation, and they provided Ms. Paterno with instructions regarding the city's ongoing defense of that lawsuit, but took no reportable action in closed session. The city, on the Lexington insurance case, the city manager advised the council that the case had reached settlement, and we now have a signed settlement agreement which is available for inspection by members of the public. And the settlement agreement provides that the insurance company, which had originally denied coverage for City of Capitola property damage after the March 2011 pipe failure, has now agreed to pay the city $1,350,000 in settlement of that claim. So that's good news. The city council heard from the city manager and city attorney with regard to an item of potential litigation involving the Surf and Sand Mobile Home Park. We provided the council with a status report on that matter, and the council gave us instructions with regard to that. And finally, with regard to the DeWitt Code Enforcement matter, we provided the council with a status report on that matter, and no reportable action was taken in closed session. There was a public employee performance evaluation scheduled for the city attorney, myself, but due to time constraints, we did not discuss that matter in closed session. And that's the end of my oral report.
Thank you very much. Next item is additions and deletions to the agenda. Any deletions or additions from staff members or from council members? Then the next item is public comments. This is a chance for you to come up and speak on any item that's not on the agenda. If it's on the agenda, please wait till we get to that item and you're welcome to speak. Generally, you have 3 minutes, and I'll give you a few more seconds afterwards. I don't like to cut people off. I'd like you to finish your thoughts, but please try to be brief. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Kinsler. I am here as representative of the CVRA, the Capitola Village Residents Association. At each of your meetings, we do have a member of our representatives attend one of your meetings and take notes and send them to all our representatives so we know what's going on. You may not realize this because sometimes some of our members stay home and watch TV while they're watch you on TV and take notes. So you may not see us here every 2 weeks, but we are here. As you probably read in the newspaper, we recently had participated in the citywide garage sale, and we raised almost $700 for the benefit of the Human Care Alliance. And Councilman Ed Bothorf was a big help with his truck and transporting big items from people's houses to the garage sale, so we thank him. September 22nd, we're going to be having a dinner at the Britannia Arms. We try to do this 3 times a year, in the fall, the winter, and the spring, and the idea is to help local restaurants during those down times fill their restaurant during the week. And the restaurant usually provides a fixed menu, with several choices for a good price. And so we hope we'll see all of you there, because you will be invited. And I'd also like to offer CVRA's help in assessing the residents' opinions on any matter that you are concerned about. We can do that by polling our residents. We have almost 300 at this point, and that's of the village. So we're talking about, a fairly small area, the Central Village, Depot Hill, the Jewel Box, we call the Upper Village, almost to New Brighton Middle School, and Riverview Terrace. So we have almost 300 members, and we can poll them on any question that you may have, or if there's not enough time to actually do a poll, we can poll the directors of the representatives from those areas. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I listened to the presentation on public safety, and well and good. However, there's a category of threat to public safety that is not being addressed, and that's the assault, and it's deadly, of the microwave radiation wireless technology. I think of an article by Helke Ferry about why our world is electropolluted. And it starts out, I believe I've already given you this article, that if something is invented by and for the military, you can be sure that it's effective and lethal. And industrial capitalists have a way of repackaging these materials, these gizmos, to make them appear safe and beneficial. However, their deadly properties remain. So out of radar of World War II came the telecommunications industry. And there's some sources documenting the adverse health effects. Bioinitiative.org, 2012, EMF Safety Network, wirelesswatchblog.org. I encourage people to pick up the Connection magazine for April that has the picture of the children playing with the earth ball. And there's an article in there by the American Academy of Environmental Medicine stating that Wi-Fi is a known risk. And to take this letter that's addressed to LA City Schools saying do not put Wi-Fi in because of the adverse effects. Take it to your schools. Share it with families. There's a lot of startling statements in there, but one is that fertility group noted that 4 hours of a laptop damaged sperm. That's just one problem. This chamber, this area, has so much Wi-Fi, microwave radiation that people stay away from here or don't stay long in here. And what's happening, as with smoking, is both the user and the non-user are harmed. We're all being affected. And whether it's the city council or the schools, the levels of the microwaves are increasing exponentially, and it is harming wildlife as well as our health. And the independent research shows this radiation causes cellular stress and damage, DNA damage, blood-brain barrier disruption, increased cancer and tumor risk, decreased melatonin, insomnia, many symptoms we hear of. Now, I I've been standing in front of a church the last 2 weeks, the Baptist Church in Porterville. And this is typical of other churches. Baptist Church microwave radiation from cell tower harms neighborhood. It's a health danger. So the church gets paid a certain amount a month, and everyone else is damaged 24/7. And there has been no signed consent form from the school personnel and children and parents. The school's directly across the street. This is at the corner of Madison and East 5th. There are other
Thank you very
churches
much.
with this. We need to stop this harm and really protect public
Thank
safety.
you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ruth Seidel. I'm a 25-year resident of Capitola Gardens under HUD and Section 8 housing. I'm 80 years old and have been on medical disability since 1985. Aesthetically, I love living in Capitola Gardens. However, as time is passing, things are changing. First, about a year ago, a charge of $25 a month was initiated for all residents parking in a covered space on the premises. The most recent change has been that many of the residents have been notified that as of July 1st, 2013, our monthly rent will be raised considerably, and we will be charged separately and additionally for water, sewer, and trash. My extra charges are $55 more in rent and $69 for the utilities, a total of $124 a month. Other residents have different amounts added to their totals. There are maintenance issues such as annual or more frequent sewage problems with Building 7, in which I have lived for 15 years. Water pressure is low. Other residents have other issues. We residents of Capitola Gardens feel that we are being abused and discriminated against by the action of G&K Management Company that they have taken to remove us from living at the housing complex. Available HUD and Section 8 living availability is not plentiful in Santa Cruz County, especially in safe areas of the county. I have been in contact with the Housing Department as recently as this morning, and I have been informed that this situation between owners and residents regarding increases is being investigated, and residents will be notified when completed. Residents have also consulted with Senior Legal Services and Urban Legal Services. We residents feel that these agencies need to know what is going on between big business and the local constituents. We are a small group here tonight. There are several residents who asked to be counted but could not physically be here. One is on hospice, not even able to move if she has to. Another resident is her caregiver and will not move. We are here to apprise Capitola City officials of this huge rent raise with utilities separate for a large portion of the residents in our complex, and seek assistance if there is any recourse for us, but to be forced to move or pay. We ask you, what assistance and or recourse do we have in this matter? We need answers, and we need them now. Thank you for allowing us to be here this evening.
Thanks for coming down. Good evening. There is a sign-up sheet if you want your name spelled correctly in the minutes.
Janice Self, and I live at Capitola Gardens for 14 years in June. And as you know, most of you know that we had an issue with our landlord a few years ago when he wanted to build some new buildings on our green areas at Capitola Gardens. It is a lovely place to live, and it used to be for seniors and disabled people. until the year 2000 when this company, G&K, paid off their mortgage, and then they were had the option of going to market rates. So since then it's gone downhill because it's not just a quiet place for senior and disabled anymore. It's families and kids, and no place for the kids to play because it was built for seniors. So we're having this other issue, and so many people are living on a small income in Section 8 and can't afford the increase. It wouldn't be so bad if it was a $55 rent increase, but they gave us this other other expense, which is water, sewer, and trash that they want us to pay for now. I think it possibly could be because the Soquel Water District raised their prices, and I think they want us to pay for the water bill. So anyway, this is really causing a crisis for a lot of people, particularly disabled. I have a disabled neighbor next door who is really upset and has so many problems, physical problems, and is trying to deal with finding another place. She feels very pressured that she couldn't afford to stay. And I find this very sad because there's no other place to go. She's been calling and trying to find people on Craigslist and so forth, and not that many people take Section 8. And the Bay Avenue apartments for seniors, their one-bedroom apartment list is closed. They have an open list for the two-bedroom apartments, but most of us live in the one-bedroom apartments. I know that Capitola has the problem of not having redevelopment money any longer, and no space, of course, to build another senior place, which we would really love to have, but that's a problem too. And mainly it's the people who are disabled, I think, living on a very small amount of money, and they can't afford the increase. So that's the main problem that I wanted to mention. I think you all have a copy of the letter from G&K Industries. It's a big corporation in Southern California, and of course they're business people, and all they're concerned about is making money. And last year they came up with, well, let's see, what else can we charge these people for? And so we have a few carports, so they started charging people $25 a month for carports. And if people want an extra parking space in the parking lot, other than their first one that they have, they're charged $15 a month for carports. And that's mainly what I wanted to say. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I've been there 14 years, and I've seen a lot of occasions of problems. We also have maintenance problems, which Ruth has mentioned. In her building, they've had a sewer problem for ages.
Thank you very much. We
Okay.
appreciate you coming down.
You're welcome.
Stephanie,
Yes.
I have a question to staff on this.
Sure.
Jamie, what jurisdiction do we have in these apartment buildings, and what opportunities do we have for assistance? Is there anything out there that...
Obviously, the city does not have a regulatory role in enforcing rents between private parties in an environment like this. Building code, the city obviously is the entity responsible for enforcing building code, so if there are building code problems, that would be something which we would be called upon to inspect and review. Unfortunately, with the loss of redevelopment funding, many of the assistance programs that would have been formerly available to these types of residents, we no longer have available because we've lost the funding for those types of programs.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Jamie, is there any way that we can contact Housing Authority regarding Section 8 not covering the increase? I understand that the increase took place, but their vouchers aren't going to cover it, which is certainly a hardship.
That's certainly a possibility. I'd be happy to contact the Housing Authority and try to get clarity about what the issue is with the Section 8 vouchers.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Harris, and I'm a resident of Capitola
Pull
Gardens.
this down a little bit, please. Thank you.
Oh, like that? Okay, I'm short. I am not on housing, although I am on a list, and I've lived at I chose to move to Capitola as my brothers lived in SoCal. I lived in SoCal 2 years, but when I came to Capitola Gardens, I was attending Cabrillo College. I am a single grandma who's raising a granddaughter, and I don't have assistance from HUD. I pay rent like everybody else, and it shouldn't matter one way or another where your funds come from as long as you pay rent on time. The reason I'm here is because I'm afraid that the way that it's going for people on housing, when I was told when I moved to Capitola Gardens 7 years ago, that when my housing would come through, that they would be more than happy to have me. And now I think that it's not going to go that way. You don't mind paying for what you have. I mean, we live in a one-bedroom, but certainly if you're going to pay that rent, you should have the upkeep of that unit without having to go a year or 2 years without being able to get a fan vent, with not having to look forward to having sewage back up every year, maybe 2 times a year. Even though they brought a plumber out, the stench is terrible. We can't get new toilets. We can't keep our clean. It's not healthy. I also feel that the fees that they charge, whether it's in the contract or not, we're going through hard economic times, and especially our seniors, because when you don't get assistance, like myself, I got ill, and then I got behind in my water bill. When I paid my rent, they brought my rent back to me and said, "We don't want to take your rent. We want you to pay the water bill and the rent, or maybe perhaps you should move and find a place that you can afford." Well, my issue with that is that I paid my rent on time, but then my water bill got behind when I was in the hospital, and I haven't been able to catch up. So what happens is that I get a lot of backup fees, and I can't get out of it. I just think that the Capitola Gardens should go to a point, we need to know what's going on with our seniors here. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for coming down. Good evening.
Good evening. Mary Anderson from Capitola Gardens. I pay privately, but I'm aware of all the issues. We're also required, and the HUD Section 8 people, to have rental insurance, which is an additional charge. There's a $5 a month billing fee. There's a sewer charge. There's a water charge. And then there is that's all, the billing fee. The water recently has gone up almost $20 a month with no notification to anybody. The manager will come into your apartment without any notice whatsoever. They never give 24-hour notice for checking on issues within your unit. I have lived there 8 months. I have a 2-bedroom bungalow, and I have no smoke detector at all, and they are aware of it. I also have a service dog, and they're charging me double, an extra fee per month, and a pet deposit as well. The company G&K, Goldrich and Kest, they are aware of seniors and rights because in Los Angeles they own several licensed assisted living communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to speak next? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Goran Klepic. I worked at one of the venues last summer here in Capitola. And I would actually thank the police department here in Capitola. I consider this police department as the best one in the county. I worked in Europe with police departments before. I served the military in the European Army. in Switzerland, actually. And what I sometimes miss here is people criticize too much the CPD for being too strict, or they say, well, they crack down too much on irregularities, or if something is wrong. You know, I mean, sometimes I think people don't know what you're dealing here with when you're standing in front of those venues. People are drinking for 5 or 6 hours, and they walk out, and then they get into an argument, and you don't have the basis of laws to do anything physical. Otherwise, you have lawyers also involved in an instance if something happens. So I really would like you to know that they're doing really a great job. And I come from a background where I had to guard military complexes in Switzerland, like military hospitals. So I know certain. I'm trained in psychology, how people behave when they are under influence on certain substances, and that's why I'm sometimes saddened that there is criticism on the police department too much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too. Who else would like to speak?
Madam Mayor, while we're waiting, I did want to just interject for those residents from Capitola Gardens that a number of the statements that you made, if true, you may want to consider Senior Legal Services or California Rural Legal Assistance. Okay, and they're both excellent attorneys who could help you work through some of these issues.
Good evening.
Hello. Mayor Harlan, council members, I'm Sandy Erickson. I still live at 117 Cabrillo Street in Capitola. And I would like to ask a question. We have a nice little park in our area called Cortez Park is the official name, I think. But we all call it Hidden Park because if you don't know where it is, you can't find it. And I was just wondering if it would be possible for the city to paint the curb red at the entrances to that park. Just enough so that, because there are signs saying that they're there, you can't see them because oftentimes there are motorhomes, big trucks, all kinds of things right over it. And you know, it's fenced off, so it's closed right till you get to the sidewalk, so you don't have a lot of maneuvering room for anything. And I just wonder if that's something that could be done. And I'm not going to pass up the opportunity to come down here, anybody who might be watching, encourage everybody to vote no on Measure S, even though I know you guys supported it, because they're doing to us in our homes, the various governments are, exactly what the landlords are doing to these people in these apartments. And it would be sad when you own a home and you can't afford to live in it because of the various fees and taxes and things that come along with it. So anybody listening, please vote no on Measure S if you haven't done it. And the other thing I wanted to ask about, I was looking for the budget online, and Tori was kind enough to get me a paper copy of it just a minute ago. I guess iPads are good for a lot of things, but not necessarily looking at the budget. And the question that I have been asking and haven't found anybody yet who has an answer, and since we're coming into the budget season, I've been asking, and since we know that the largest part of the budget is the police department, I'm curious as to what drives overtime in the police department. And if anybody, I know that we saw a windfall in last year's budget because we didn't use what had been budgeted. And the other question that I'm asking is, do we staff differently? Because I was asked this when we were talking about Measure O by somebody at the Sentinel. Do they staff differently when we have 80,000 people in town as opposed to when we have our 9,500 residents? And that seems to be, I've asked in several places that question, and nobody seems to know the answer to that. And that seems to be a fairly reasonable thing, or do we just accept what comes about? So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity for talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Do you want to say anything, Jamie, or do you want her to call the chief tomorrow, or?
No, if the chief has anything to add, if you do want to call the chief tomorrow, I'm sure he can follow through.
Yeah, he can answer all those questions. Okay, any other oral communications? Okay, then we'll move on to council and staff announcements. Dennis, do you have any?
I just have one short one. On Saturday, May 18th, Save Our Shores will do a beach cleanup in Capitola, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's actually beach and the river. They're going to clean both. And so anybody wants to join in a fun morning and feel good about it, that'll be May 18th at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'll meet on Capitola Beach. Thank you.
Great. Sam, do you have anything?
No announcements.
Ed, do you have anything?
Nothing for me.
Michael, do you have anything?
Yes. I would love to be there, Dennis. I had to decline because I'll be at, thank you, Sam, the library finance retreat for the budget.
You're very welcome.
No problem. And all day Saturday, I might add. The American Red Cross on May 15th will host the Heroes Breakfast at the Coconut Grove. Support your local Red Cross. And also, before the folks go from Capitola Gardens, there's a website you're going to want to go to. It's the number 10, the word ANTS, ANTS.com. It's the Tenants' Rights website for Santa Cruz County. They have resources that you probably have not had available to you. So anybody back there wants to pass it on to them, carry on. But more about the Red Cross. They're a phenomenal organization. I sit on the board. They help, if somebody's house burns down, they help when there's floods, fires. But they also do things like train us in CPR and first aid. They also are the first line of communication as a former parent of a former member of the Marine Corps. When my son was deployed, the very first people who contacted me was the Red Cross. They told me how to get in touch with my son and how to do it quickly while he was overseas, and I'll be forever grateful. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sue,
by the way, the Warriors are ahead by 1.5 points.
Wow.
I'll let you know.
Sue, could you contact the SoCal School District and see if you can get some of the senior exemption forms for Measure S? Sometimes they're available online, sometimes you call them and they send it to you. But I think if we had a nice stack of them upstairs on the counter, when we got questions about it or heard concerns from seniors on fixed incomes, we could say, call Linda and she'll send you one, or go down, drop off at stop by City Hall and pick up one. I think that would be a nice service to our residents. This Saturday is the annual Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Symposium, and it's an all-day, or you can just drop in for a couple of hours. It's down at Cal State Monterey Bay at the University Center, and it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning with registration, welcome at 9, and then 40-minute talks by various scientists. But it's geared for lay people and it's geared for students. So some of it's a little above our heads, but a lot of it is stuff that we can understand and enjoy. And then they have lunch, and then they have a poster session. And then they have the Doc Ricketts Memorial Lecture every year. And this is going to be Dr. Mark Carr from UC Santa Cruz. So, and then they will adjourn after the poster awards at 3:15. So if you're looking for something kind of different and fun, or you have a child or a student that's interested in marine sciences, take them to this for a couple of hours, because it'll get you up to see the campus, which is fun, and to attend some very interesting sessions to see what the research is and the latest going on in marine science. A week from Saturday, on May 4th, is the annual Capitola Kite Classic down at the beach. So put that on your calendar and try to attend that, and we'll hope for wind, because that's a really fun day and a fun event that we have. The next item is the board and commission committee appointments. We don't have any.
Mayor Harlan, I just wanted to make note of the correction of the April 11th minutes and I gave you a copy for General Government 9D.
Oh, thank you.
Added the vote was unanimous.
Oh, thank you very much.
And I made the correction on the minutes and also added Swanger to the minutes.
Mr. Swanger, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the consent calendar. This is a list of 5 items which are relatively minor in scope, and we take in one motion unless someone from the council would like to pull it for questions or separate discussion, or someone from the audience would like to pull an item for separate discussion and questions. Would anyone from the audience like to pull anything tonight?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second.
Any questions?
I have one question on item E.
Sure, go ahead.
And on the budget proposal, it says there's funds available for $39,700, yet the amount available was remaining from last year was $34,656. I was wondering where the extra $5,000 is coming from.
This is about the funding, the SLESF funding, was it?
Correct.
I'll give the quick answer. And
Here she comes.
well, let Tori come up here because I know she helped prepare this section here.
Good evening.
Good evening. There was an additional grant funding that came in this year, I believe, for close to $100,000, so that would help cover the additional piece.
That'll be for the next year. That $100,000 is coming out of that. Is that
Yes, there was a fund balance of about $34,000, and then we had another.
another 100? Okay. Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Then we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item are the general government. They're all public hearings, so if you'd like to speak, you're certainly welcome to. The first one is A, presentation by the Santa Cruz Water Department and the Soquel Creek Water District regarding the proposed regional seawater desalination project. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome
evening.
to Capitola.
Thank you. I'm Taj Dufour with Soquel Creek Water, and thank you for having us tonight. This is Bill Coker with the City of Santa Cruz Water Department. And I know in the past we sat down with the council members and promised that we'd come back to you when we were a little bit closer to release the EIR. And so we're getting to that point. So we'd like to recap a little bit of what we've done in the past, and there's a slideshow that I think Steve's getting ready to bring up for you.
I have 1 minute to try and make that screen work.
Sure. I can pull it up.
Okay. Got it?
Yes, man. This happened in Santa Cruz today, too. Somebody was having trouble with the presentation, and I was having a meeting with the city manager, and they came into his office and asked him to come into the conference room and help. Stuff that Mike set up, by the way, very nicely.
I'll be your clicker this evening, so just let
Okay,
me know when you'd like
wonderful.
to advance.
Let me, let's just shoot straight on there, Jamie, then, please, and let's just kind of go over, I think you all know this, but I just want to hit the highlight here. Santa Cruz City Water serves the areas of Capitola up to roughly 41st Avenue. And then Soquel serves from 41st on down into the village. And so that's why we're both standing here before you. And that's why we met with you all to try to explain to you how it is that Capitola is impacted by the problems of both agencies. You have the unique distinction of having problems from both sides. The city of Santa Cruz has we serve about 91,000 customers. Those are people, not connections. Just in the city of Santa Cruz, we actually have about 45,000 jobs, which is more than 50% of all the non-farm jobs in the county. And as you know, a lot of those are in Capitola, between the Capitola Mall and the Auto Mall and Home Depot. So you have a lot of that employment base actually in Capitola as well. We're mostly a surface water agency, meaning that the water that we serve comes from streams and creeks. So we're highly impacted and immediately impacted by weather like this year. And as a matter of fact, the city has declared 15% restriction, or I'm sorry, 5% restriction on water use in this coming summer because this has been a very, very strange year. We get no water from outside the county. Neither of us do. We are largely residential. We have some of our, we have actually a declining amount of water that goes to industry. And a lot of people think that UCSC is a huge, huge consumer of water in the city, but it actually isn't. It's about 5% of the total water use is at the university. So the university is actually not as big a player, I think, as a lot of people assume they are. Our big use is indoor, and obviously the largest part of that is in the residential sector.
Right, and for the water district, clarify that although our name has creek in it, we do not get any water from a creek. We're solely a groundwater agency, so we have several groundwater wells that pull water out of the ground. We're about half the size of the Santa Cruz Water Department. We serve about 38,000 customers, and we also support about 18,000 jobs. Like I said before, we're reliant solely on groundwater, and we don't currently receive any water from surface or imported water. We have more residential use, about 79%, with about 13% commercial, and the remainder is for irrigation and institutional use. Similar to the city, most of the use is for indoors, about 75%, and outdoor use is about 25%. Next slide, please, Jamie. Bill's going to talk a little bit about the shortage that the city faces, and then after that I'll fill in for the district.
Well, make no mistake, in the city it's all weather. And so we have other problems, but they're all weather related. So when we get low rainfall, we're in trouble. When we have plentiful rainfall, we're fine. The other problem is that for years the city has effectively ignored, I guess is the frank way to put it, our environmental responsibility for threatened and endangered species that exist in the creeks and rivers from which we draw our sources. And the federal government and the Department of Fish and Game has implored us to get in the game and make things better for the fisheries. So we are, and the result of that is that it will end up as a loss of about 25% of our current production capacity. So the situation is not particularly good in drought, and it's going to get much worse in drought. While we will get some relief in drought from those regulations, we will not be relieved solely. And so it is drought related. In normal and wet years, I think we've worked out an agreement that is protective of the fisheries, but not so in dry and critically dry. Groundwater limitations, we draw some of our water from the very same groundwater basin that Soquel Creek does, so we have the same problems that Taj is going to describe.
Next slide, Jamie. So as I said earlier, we pull all our water out of the ground from groundwater wells. And recently, over the last year, we were informed by our hydrologist that in order to ensure that this groundwater basin that we solely rely on is protected from saltwater intrusion, it's a unique situation being right next to the ocean. It's wonderful for our community, but it's also a threat to a groundwater supply when it's over pumped. And so when the freshwater levels get to below certain levels, there's that threat and that opening for saltwater to come in. Our neighbors to the south in Pajaro are dealing with that crisis right now, and we do not want to have that here in our community. So what we have found is that it's a conservative, or it's not conservative actually, a reduction of about 35% in our groundwater pumping has about a 70% confidence level that we can restore the basin to a level that is protective. And when I say that, I mean we need to build up the freshwater levels to a level above the sea level, and this also applies to the city's wells. The middle slide there is a little glimpse of, we maintain a series of about 75 monitoring wells that do not produce any water. They're the dipsticks for our basin that give us the level and whether or not salt water has intruded. We found that there's many times that they're not above sea level. And in addition to that, we have a couple locations where saltwater is advancing inward. It hasn't reached our production wells, but it is at the coast and it's moving in. Further complicating things is regulations coming for hexavalent chromium. There's already a public health goal that's been established, and we anticipate in the next year or two regulations that we will most likely be obligated to meet. And so those are complicating our supply for your customers and our customers. So together, both agencies are really looking at, I'm ready for the next slide, Jamie, if you want. both looking at a solution that is not a complete solution. It involves curtailment, like Bill said, in dry and critically dry years. They're going to rely on some curtailment. In addition to that, conservation has taken us very far. Our customers use about half the state average, which is wonderful, but it gets down to that point where, you know, you've taken the easy hanging fruit, the low hanging fruit. So the solution that we're looking towards involves more conservation. We're going to rely on that as much as we can, using our existing supplies to a limited amount, about 35% less for the district, and then also curtailment during dry and critically dry years. I should mention that the district recently called for a 15% curtailment this summer. We're a little bit different because we rely on the rainfall that recharges our aquifer, and it's been 2 years of below average rainfall, and so we need to cut back a little bit more than the city. So we'd like to share with you what the consequences are of not finding a solution, a supplemental supply. For the district, without a supplemental source, we would have to rely on our customers to cut back and save that amount of water that we want to reduce our pumping by. So really, this is more than just a summertime curtailment. This would be a year in and year out, all year long cutback for 35% pumping. This has never been done before. It's pretty much, it has a really high risk of, or a low risk of success, high risk of saltwater intrusion because it may not be proven to work. It'll obviously have an impact on all the residents in our community and businesses and tourism. The city, as Bill mentioned, would be in severe water rationing, up to as high as 40%. There would be extreme limits on outdoor water use. Back to the district, we would essentially be looking at a water budget for our customers, which would be about 53 gallons per person per day. It pretty much precludes outdoor watering. Then at the district, or at the city, there'd be recreational facilities would be shut down. Parks and pools would not likely be able to operate. Again, it affects all residents, businesses, and tourism would be affected. Next slide. So it brings us to the proposed regional desalination project that we've been studying for several years now jointly. Both agencies looked at this together to really find a solution that solves two different problems. The city needs a supply in dry and critically dry years. The district needs a source to year-round, year in, year out, to cut back pumping. This facility would allow for that, and we've studied it. We've conducted several studies over the years. We successfully operated a pilot plant for over a year. We've studied intake structures in the bay that answered questions about how to take in water from the ocean. We've also looked at addressing issues of the brine, the salt that gets taken out, and what to do with that, how to do that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The proposed plant would be shared, the cost would be shared between the two agencies, and the agency operating the plant would be paying for the operational cost during the time they're operating it. We can go to the next slide. I think it'll cover a little bit of the details. There's, obviously the environmental impact report is going to address all of the environmental impacts. associated with the proposed project. Some of the key ones are the intake and its effect on marine life, energy, and should mention that both agencies have committed to a carbon neutral plant. So that includes ways to offset 100% of the carbon footprint that it would generate. And then also the brine discharge, and there's a graphic there. It's too small for you to see, but we're fortunate to live in a community that has a wastewater treatment plant that discharges the treated sewage to the bay, and that's relatively fresh water right now, and the brine could be mixed with that and reintroduced into the bay at a concentration that's similar to the salt water that's in the bay. So the EIR will be addressing several, I'm sure you're familiar with EIRs, but each category gets addressed. Hydrology and water quality, marine biological resources, terrestrial biology resources, land use, planning and recreation, air quality and climate, including greenhouse gas emissions, noise and vibration, geology and soils, cultural resources, utilities and services, aesthetics, hazards and hazardous materials, traffic and transportation, growth impacts, and any cumulative impacts with other projects in the community. So with that said, we're hoping to release an EIR, it's a draft EIR, for the community to comment on mid-month next month, so mid-May we're hoping. It's close. We're shooting for that day, second, third week in May. The document will be available on our websites, at all the local libraries, the city water department, as well as at our office for any of those that don't have access to technology. We're planning to have public meetings. It says June 3rd, but it could be early June or July, depending on when it's released. We'd like to have those meetings a little bit into the comment period so that people can have a chance to look at the document. There's also a community guide that will be available that summarizes the EIR. It's going to be a large document, and if those people need to address certain issues, they can look at a community guide, and it'll take them right to the section of the EIR that they're interested in. Also, at those public meetings, people can submit their oral comments. And then all throughout the comment period, people can submit written comments about the document, and then both agencies will review the comments and respond to all comments throughout the rest of the year. With that, I'm done with our presentation, but we're here to answer any questions.
What's the timeline of the comment period?
It's 60 days currently.
Okay, I was going to say 30 days isn't going to be enough, and I would give people more than 2 weeks' time. If you release it in mid-May, then
Right.
give people more than 2 weeks to read this document, or they're going to be furious. It's such a controversial project, and it's so complicated and so large. I would err on the side of giving people plenty of time to read what they want to read and prepare their comments, because then they won't be so mad.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other comments, Sam?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Could you speak to the financing of the project, both the initial capital outlay and the operational costs?
Sure. Current estimates are the total capital cost is about $115 million. And both agencies have because there is a priority of use on the plant, the district is would be responsible for 41% of that capital cost, and then the city would be responsible for 59% of that. So for the district, it's, I think, roughly $50 million. And then, as I said before, the operating costs will be the responsibility of whichever agency is using it. So the district is proposing to use the plant at a roughly half capacity when the city is not using it, and I think the city, when they need to call upon it in a drought or dry year, they would use it at full capacity, 2.5 million gallons a day.
And if I may, follow up with the kind of freshwater production, I mean, if you're using it at half capacity, that's going to create about 1.25 million gallons a day. For the city, that's 2.5. Does that immediately go into the usage system, or do you have reservoirs that you store the water in?
Well, I think for the district, we would obviously be cutting back our pumping, so it would go into our system into our demand.
And it would go directly in?
It's sort of like in lieu of a well, we would be using that water.
Okay.
One point is that this is a relatively small piece of both of our supplies. It's not going to overwhelm, either system. And I think, the plan is to utilize some of the city's infrastructure to convey the water to this side of town. And certainly for the city, I think 2.5 million gallons a day is not going to overflow their tanks at all. It's a relatively small.
What percentage is that of the city's usage?
When we're using it, it'll represent about 20% of the total daily demand.
In the IR, obviously they're going to address alternatives to this. What alternatives are out there if this doesn't fly? What alternatives do you have besides conservation?
Well, we've heard a lot of comments about reclaimed water, and we've studied the district has studied that independently as a way to help cut back our pumping. But a regional plant at the wastewater treatment plant is going to be looked at. Unfortunately, direct potable reclaimed water is not legal currently, but it is obviously legal for irrigation purposes. Scotts Valley has a reclaimed plant, and so does Watsonville. The other options that we've considered.
Well, there's a lot of
no
conservation. There will be a no project alternative. There are many different iterations of desal as well that will be listed. There isn't a reservoir option listed because the city basically walked away from that a long time ago. I kind of regret that it isn't at least discussed, but we kind of decided early on that we wouldn't. So there won't be a reservoir option. There will be a look at, just what would the impact be on the community effectively if we relied on nothing but more conservation. But there are kind of limited alternatives. There's a groundwater reclaim swap on the north coast that may or may not do much to help the Soquel situation. That'll be discussed in the EIR. So there are just not a whole lot of alternatives, frankly. Water transfer,
water exchange.
The water exchange, using water from the San Lorenzo River to move to Soquel in most winters, and then in drought, perhaps moving some water from the Soquel groundwater system back to the city. That will be discussed.
In the political arena, is it going to require both jurisdictions to make this work? One can't do it without the other?
Actually, no. There is an option for one agency to carry the project. That's one of the options that's considered. But for the proposed project, it is a joint project.
But the facilities are designed for Santa Cruz, aren't they? In the city of Santa Cruz?
They would be located in Santa Cruz, but that doesn't mean that the district couldn't.
Oh, you could still, Soquel Creek could still own the facilities.
That's correct.
Okay. Stepping further in the political arena on this thing, I know the city of Santa Cruz actually had a vote referendum. I'm not sure exactly what the requirements are that whether this goes to a vote. You're going to probably be asked why wasn't the rest of the county or Capitola or Soquel district included in this process, being that it should not be one jurisdiction that makes the decision for everyone else.
Yeah, our board of directors will consider that this summer. They're gonna decide on calling for a vote in our area. Now, the unincorporated area of Live Oak is a supervisor action, but our vote would cover customers in the city of Capitola.
So the board is considering that?
Our board will be considering that this summer.
Okay, and so in a timeline, what would be your best case scenario when you can have a plant operational?
After the close of the comment period, we'll have to respond to all the comments and then put together a final EIR that gets presented to both agency governing bodies. They would consider certification of that document, and then they would consider approval of the project contingent upon the vote. And then the next vote is June of next year, June of 2014, and depending on that outcome, I think there's a couple years of design, a year of design work.
A year of design, a year of permitting, and a year of construction. So
more.
2016,
2016?
2017.
So we have a few years out, and hoping that the water situation doesn't get any worse in between then, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, we're rolling dice.
One more question. In this process, does the water taste different, or is there a different quality than you normally would get from subsurface or surface water?
If not buffered, it would, but we'll take steps to make the water. First of all, there's not a lot of the blend is going to be desal. So what would arrive here would be a mix of desal and our surface waters, and then it would be blended with the groundwaters over here. But it's also going to be buffered at the plant, so that when it leaves, it'll be treated either, where the pH adjustment, whether it's carbon, whatever needs to happen to make it taste pretty much like our surface waters taste. It's pretty pure. It's extremely pure water, and it does have a different taste because it's not mineralized. It goes through these membranes, and virtually everything is removed, and we're used to tasting minerals and naturally occurring materials. So we've got to make the water taste like it tastes.
Just one comment. We all just take it for granted that water is going to appear in our faucets and always be there. You know, that's maybe not an assumption we should always take, but we do that. And we also expect as a community that the quality be a certain level. The other part of it is that I've always felt that for bang for your buck, water is one of the cheapest utilities that you can get out there. It costs more to take care of sewage or the waste end of it than it does for the water coming to your house. That's a pretty good deal you give us, I think, for the water.
Thank you.
We appreciate that comment. It's our mission to try to get people to understand the value of water.
Michael.
Would you review one more time the funding mechanism for this?
Well, for the district, we would certainly have to go out for loans of some sort.
It would show up in the water bill at some point.
Yes.
For all involved.
Yeah.
And I know you're a bit far out for design. I also know that for what little familiarity I have with desal plants, the greatest cost is the power, and it's the highest of the carbon footprint items, and it's the most expensive to get rid of with regard to carbon footprint, getting your own power. How much work has been done looking into Lockheed Martin's new developments with regard to desal membranes? It's purported to be, and it's almost ready to come to market, as little as 1/100th the power requirement of current membrane technology. Are you familiar with it?
So the graphene?
Yes.
Yeah. We're following that. And then, the project isn't going to include several energy reduction features. There's several recovery devices, and a lot of the old plants didn't have the technology that is available today. But there's energy recovery devices using what's left after it goes through the reverse osmosis membranes. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of pressure in the water, and that can be recycled with turbines. And I think there's also some photovoltaic projects that are included, and a hydro turbine.
And photovoltaic arguably is the most expensive way to make electricity, so we all understand that, with the worst payback. But that being said, it seems that a lot of the rhetoric is involved in the amount of the bang for the buck, the amount of power required to produce a gallon of desal water, and it all boils down to, regardless of how much you bring back, from salvaging, it all boils down to the membrane. And I would think that for a couple of years out, that could change the whole complexion of your project and make it more viable.
That's true.
Yeah,
To the critics. And just as a last comment, no one has more respect for our little local water district than I do. You do an amazing job. You do it with care. You're sometimes being called the bully and the people who force us to save water, but you also maintain water usage for years at a flat, curve, and that's just amazing. One criticism I will bring forward to you right now that flies in the face of our housing element with the state to provide accessory dwellings, the concept that you would require 2 water meters for one parcel of land in Capitola is frankly something that I will push very hard against. So you may want to digest that a little bit. But I still love you.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions right now? It's a public hearing, so we'll open it in a minute.
Yeah, no, you've covered everything, all the questions I have. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay, this is a public hearing, and we have one of the directors here tonight. Welcome, Mr. Daniels.
Thank you very much. I'm Bruce Daniels. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Directors of the Water District. And I'm going to say some things as well having to do with my education process. I'm hopefully finishing up the last year of my PhD in UCSC in hydroclimatology, which is how climate change is going to impact water. And that's really important because if you look at this, first of all, if we don't do anything, if we just keep going on the way we're going on, every expert who comes in says, you will get saltwater intrusion, which poisons your wells, you can't use them anymore. The only question is when. I like to say it's like putting a pipe down in your gas tank and siphoning the gas out, and you go, nothing happens, you go, nothing happens, and eventually, you're not sure when, you get a mouthful of gasoline, and once you get it, it's almost impossible to get rid of. And that's the situation we're in, is that once we get saltwater intrusion, we're stuck with it. You just don't get rid of it. Your wells basically become unusable, and it eventually advances inland, and when it goes all the way, then you have no water supply. So we don't want that. And let me tell you a little bit about sort of what it makes all this stuff even worse, which is climate change. This county recently did a study on climate change, and one of the things they looked at was water situations. And so in the Soquel district, we're looking at, by the end of the century, a reduction of our groundwater recharge, and of course that's what feeds our groundwater supply. It will be reduced by 30%. So as bad as things are right now, we don't do anything, it's going to get 30% worse. Second, if you look even at the San Lorenzo that the city depends on, it's also going to get worse. The change of total stream flow is going to go down by 18%. And if you look at the groundwater recharge, which is what feeds the flow during the summer, which is their critical time, that's going to be reduced by 25%. So we clearly have this problem that's coming up. As someone once said, it's like a train coming at you, and you're not quite sure how close it's getting. But if you don't do something quick, it's not going to be quick enough then to avoid the problem. In terms of the election, we've talked about the election over and over again, and everyone nods their heads up and down, so I can almost guarantee we will have an election. We're not sure when to have it and what color paper to use and all that stuff, but we will have a vote next month, or in June actually, on that, and I'm sure we'll approve it. Let's see, you asked a question.
It'll be advisory or it'll be binding?
Well, something else we have to discuss. I mean, we have all different opinions about that. What we all are agreeing on so far, but haven't had the vote on it, is that we want to have an election. Because, in fact, if we go down this route to this, what we call rationing, this 35% rationing, everyone has to buy into that. We can't call out the Gestapo and force people to do that. People need to say, yes, I prefer doing that than doing a desal plant. And so if that's the case, that's what we need to do, is to get everyone to vote for it. And so that's the reason to have that. I was also going to talk a little bit about, why are we doing this 15% cutback? And actually, as you can imagine, the city is very dependent on the fact that, they have to have precipitation to feed their streams. But in spite of the fact this is the second year in a very serious year of drought, you can still go down to Soquel Creek or San Lorenzo and find water in the stream. Not very much, I guarantee. But this year, because of the reduction in precipitation, we will get zero recharge. There will be no recharge going into the ground. It will all have either run off or evaporated, or the plants will have picked it up and sent it up into the air. So, it's even more serious this year for us than it is for the city. And so that's why we're calling for a 15% cutback. Let's see, what else was asked that I could respond to? You have any questions? We're
on that 15%,
Yeah.
Bruce, will that regenerate the recharge or by doing that? I mean, it's...
Well, it works out for us, for the district. We're needing to reduce by 35% to get the basin back, and it takes us at least 20 years. That's not even including sea level rise. As the sea level rises, we have to raise our groundwater levels correspondingly. So it'll be more than 20 years. But it turns out that the 35% reduction to recover the groundwater for 20 years is very similar to the 30% reduction in recharge. So it's really going to be, we have to reduce it for more than 20 years and probably just keep it there forever, because we'll be losing additional supply through this reduction in recharge.
Okay.
But yes, the city does have its own issues with the fact that if they look at the typical drought they look at is the 75-76 drought, which was an extreme 2-year drought. And in the future, we're going to have more droughts, and they'll be more severe. So, we need to... That's the good thing about a supply like this, is it's a drought-proof supply. I mean, even if we get zero rain one year, we know that we can go to that plant and get some water. And if we didn't have that, there would be no water to get. So it's sort of planning for the future is what it is.
Michael. Bruce.
Yeah.
One of my favorite neighbors and scientists.
Thank you.
Two items.
Yep.
You've educated us a lot, and the Water District has educated the community
Right.
on water-saving techniques.
Yes.
How can we promote the increase in recharge? I know we let an abundant amount of water just wash out to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
How can we promote within the community individual members aiding in the recharge of our aquifer?
Well, this year, for the first time, we have a rebate to allow people to do that. What I've done at my home, everyone has it, is that you go out to your home and there are gutters and downspouts, and the downspouts take all the water and dump it in the street, and it runs away.
Which
is a
has,
shame.
for a long time, been a building department requirement that you force all the water out into the street.
You basically throw all the water away.
Right.
And so what I've done at my house, I built it according to plan, and then I've disconnected them. And I have a little, if you come by my house and look, there's like a little dry stream bed. And a couple of my neighbors have done the same things. And the water from the downspouts goes into that dry stream bed. Eventually, if it would fill up, it goes to the street. But that's never happened. So every time, the biggest rains we get, it goes down in there and it goes down into the ground. It recharges. Because studies have been done of the developed area of our coast, and we have about 60% of our land surface is covered by impervious surfaces like streets, parking lots, houses, roofs, driveways. So all that land that used to be recharge is gone. And instead what we do is we dump it very quickly into the streams, which causes erosion and sedimentation because the streams are not set up to take that amount of water that quickly. So you're right. The more we can do that, it helps the water supply situation, and it helps for pollution.
And secondly, and I know the answer to this, but it would be nice for you to comment on it, the alternative has always been waved in our face with regard to Soquel Creek creating a reservoir somewhere. Would you speak to the impracticalities of that?
The big issue about a reservoir, building the reservoir actually is not the big problem. The problem is you probably would like to get some water to fill your reservoir up. Yep. Soquel Creek, as an example, is fully apportioned. Every drop of water in that creek has been allocated by the state to various people up and down the creek for example, the city has 2 cubic feet per second allocated to the stream right out here for fish. So you've got some portion of that that's your allocation, and everything is allocated. So if you go and take water out of the stream, you are taking somebody's water. You're essentially violating state water rights. And so how are you going to get enough water to fill up a reservoir? In fact, the NOAA Fisheries and the State Fish and Game recently came out with a coho recovery plan. They'd actually like to recover the coho back into that stream, and they're asking people to give up their water rights. So if you were to go to the state and ask for more water, they're going to oppose that because they want people to give up water rights, not grab new ones. So the possibility of getting enough water to actually do a reservoir is pretty close to zero.
So we don't have the ability to, like Santa Cruz, to acquire surface water to fill a reservoir?
Well, they already have the water rights. You know, if we had them now, we could do that.
Okay.
But to get enough to fill that up now, it's very problematical, very dubious, and it takes a long time. We've been told that there are only 3 people at the state who approve all the water rights in the entire state, and it takes something like 20 years, more if you got opposition. So if Fish and Game comes up and says, we're not sure we like this, then they go back and study it more. It takes even longer. So we might not have an answer for over 20 years, and if the answer is no, you sat there, you know, kind of waiting for the salt water to hit you, and now you haven't done anything. You just get a no, and you have to start all over again. So we looked at that. It's not very promising. Let's put it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We looked into it many years ago and looked at hiring a water master to look at Soquel Creek to see if people were taking water illegally out, because one year it was very, very low, and so of course we thought that one of your wells was tapping into Soquel Creek, which turned out not to be the case.
Right.
But we said we think people are illegally. If you walk up there, you can see the pipes right into the creek.
Oh yeah.
And the pumps going right up to the nurseries and private homes and all kinds of things. So, you know, that might be, I don't know whether that's doable or expensive or possible, but it's always been on my list of things to do, just to make sure that people aren't taking illegally procured water out of there.
Right.
And, you know, it's probably not that much, but still it's the whole idea of it. And
well, particularly a year like this. I mean, I don't know if you've gone out to Soquel Creek. It looks like August out there right now.
Yeah.
It does.
It is very likely to go dry this summer, which means the fish run this year will die. You know, there will be no fish in the creek. And unfortunately, that is the future. This is a precursor of what the future is like. Currently, we get all our precipitation in 4 months: December, January, February, March, or most of it, you know, like 80, 75%. And the future is we will get all that precipitation in 2 months, January and February. And that's kind of what happened this year. We got a lot of rain in November and December, and then it just stopped. The last 3, you know, the 3 months, January, February, March, were the driest in recorded history. 120 years of recorded data around here. We've never seen that amount of dryness for those 3 months. And that's why that creek and the San Lorenzo, too, are that far down.
Dennis.
I'm going to take advantage of having 2 water directors here and a director. And I'm going to expand a little bit on Mike's statement, Bruce, and change the subject on you a little bit. But we have a housing program mandated by the state. And part of our program is that we allow for, in larger lots, we allow for secondary units. It's become a real problem in encouraging people or getting people to do that when they know that they have to have a separate water meter and sewer connections on it. And water may run you, I think it's $10,000-$12,000 for the permit, and then another $8,000 or so to the time you tap in the street. And you do the same thing with sewer. You may be into it $35,000. Well, people turn their back on doing projects like that. So it's really, at this point, it's hurting a housing program that we worked hard to get, and is accepted by the community. And it would be really good if you looked at your policies on that, because it's not that they're using any more water, it's just the ability for you to look at it separately. You always have control of the water meter. You know exactly how much that house is using. And having 2 units like that doesn't necessarily mean there's more people living there. It just means that they're separated. And so I appreciate if you guys could look at that policy and see what you can do to help us.
Well, that's conceivable. And certainly we're not doing this to try and slow down housing or harm housing, because that's not our charter. That's your charter to control housing or to promote it. It's strictly for us is how can we control water use? And it's definitely the case that the bigger things get, like if you have an apartment complex with, you know, 20 houses, 20 apartments in it. It's the case that people stop caring. They don't even know how much water they're using. And they could use zero water, and the facility still uses water. In fact, I know that one of these here in Capitola, they're complaining about one of the residents who just waters his grass every day, inches of water, because it doesn't cost him much. It adds, small percentage to the overall complex, but he doesn't pay what he's really using. And that's a problem. And, certainly for some of these granny units, if it is indeed your granny there, you can kind of control things. But over time, what we're worried about is that the granny units get sold as an apartment just to some other person. And then there's the issue, oh, well, the water bill's gone up. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. And, how do you prove it? Because you don't have a meter on each one.
Well, you couldn't, in our cases, you can't separate and sell them separately. They'll always stay one. We're not creating land divisions here.
Well, even if you rent it, though, there's the issue that you've got now two separate groups
But if you were living in that main house, you would be watching that water meter. So somebody is watching that. And plus, you guys always have, because you do is you tier people. So you tier it up. I mean, it gets more expensive if you use that. The water, not per gallon, but per usage gets higher as you use it. So we feel that right now it's becoming damaging to, and this is true all the way through the county, because I deal with all jurisdictions, and people are turning their back on putting secondary units in now because of it. And it's not just you, it's also the sanitation department too that's doing it. So, okay, thank you.
Well, one of the things that was mentioned, and I should repeat it again, this rationing program we're talking about, one of the components that's being proposed for that is a moratorium. That if we're having to reduce our water usage by 35%, and just to give you a feel for how difficult that is, in 2009, our water use went down about 12%. And the same sort of thing happened all over this county. Central went down by 10%, Scotts Valley went down by 11%, the city went down by 12%, no, 14%, I think. Sonoma County went down by 16%. The San Francisco East Bay Mud went down 15%. Denver went down by 13%. New York City went down by 10% because there was a little event that happened in Othine. That was the global financial collapse. So this thing, it's the worst financial collapse since the Great Depression. So people were losing jobs, businesses were closing, people had, their rate of pay reduced, or if they didn't have any of those things, they were worried about them. So everyone was very concerned, and that's what caused this water reduction. So the worst financial collapse since the Great Depression reduced water use between 10 and 15%. And we're asking them to go 35%. So we are very concerned about getting there.
And then people see new developments going up and saying, why should I have to suffer when we have all these new condos or apartments or commercial buildings going up or other new residences? And it doesn't sit well with the public.
Well, what we did 5 or 6 years ago was we said, before you can build anything, if it's a school or a park or anything, you first have to save 120% of the water that your facility is going to use, which makes it be zero demand impact. So it's like the old doctor thing of first do no harm. So we have made sure that is not going to make things worse. In fact, in some sense, development helps us because it's going to save a bit more water than it's going to use. In fact, one of the things on the agenda for the June meeting is to raise that 120% to 220%. So you'll have to save over double of what you're going to use.
That's great. Do you happen to, before I open it up to the public, do you happen to have the date? There are 2 days when you're going to have a workshop on using gray water.
Yeah, it's the 18th and 19th, I believe.
May 18th and 19th,
yes.
Saturday, Sunday. And do people have to attend both days, or can they attend either day?
They're different things. The first day is kind of a discussion, class, lecture, what is it, how does it work, how do you accomplish it? And then the second day, people actually go in groups to the various homes and actually do the work. Actually install gray water. So if Dennis signed up for this, he'd come Saturday, learn about how it works, how you have to install it, how to be careful with it, and so forth. And then on Sunday, he and some others would go to his house and install it, and then he would go to their house and help them install it.
That's
so it's actually a hands-on, accomplishment, because it's great. We've done it in our house 4 or 5 years ago, and it's amazing because their water use goes up in the summer. Summer use here is double what it is in the winter because everyone's spraying drinking water on grass. And in my home, we are now flat. We use the same amount of water in winter that we use in summer. And we've been that way for about 2.5 years.
This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak? This is fascinating. Then I will close the public portion. And are there any questions from council members to any of the staff members that are here? We sure appreciate them coming, and for Director Daniels for coming and providing us with all this information. And hopefully people at home have found it interesting to listen to also. And thanks for all your good work. And we will work together on this very important issue. Thank you very much. Next public hearing is the approval and plans, specifications, and engineers' estimates for the construction of the 2013 Capitola Slurry Seal project using Measure O funds and authorization to advertise for bids.
Jamie, there's a PowerPoint with some maps. Can you pull it up? Okay, so I have pictures, just some simple maps that show the streets that we're going to do. They're also in the board agenda. We are slurry sealing 2 areas in Cliffwood Heights and in Riverview neighborhood, approximately half the streets in each neighborhood, so we can go back in there later and redo the other ones. It kind of helps to split up, not do one neighborhood at a time. We're doing the residential streets in those neighborhoods. We're not addressing the collector streets or the arterials. Typically those, we don't do a lot of slurry seals on those, and I know we've had an email concerning Monterey Avenue, why we're not addressing that, and that certainly is beyond a slurry seal at this time. It's probably a several $100,000 project to address Monterey Avenue at this time. We do have it tentatively slated to get reworked on in about 2015. So here are the 2 maps. So you can see the streets we're going to be doing in the Cliffwood Heights neighborhood are in orange on this one. And we're doing about half, and then we come in then in Riverview neighborhood. We're doing Riverview Drive and Gilroy Drive, the entire lengths. There are a couple areas in each of these sections that need to be dug out and replaced with asphalt. We're doing that under a separate contract. It's about $15,000 worth of work, which we can do under a small contract that will be ahead of these slurry seal projects. Our calendar kind of looking like we will do this in June. We'll go out to bid now. If the bids come in under our estimated cost of $99,000, we will go directly to contract with it and should get it done before the end of June. Are there any questions?
Do we feel good about doing this as soon as the summer vacation season starts, or do you feel any challenge in that? Or
It's not that disruptive. It's really one day on each street. It's only one day. Slurry goes in the morning, and by that evening, they're back on the street. So I really think we should move forward with it.
And with any luck, we hopefully will accelerate Monterey if we find some money somewhere.
We'll be coming back to you with a whole list of streets and kind of a schedule for them, and you will have a chance to have input in at that time.
Where's the now infamous Clare Street repaving project?
So that is part of the next budget cycle. So the funding for that should be coming available in July.
Wonderful.
And we still need to finish the design on it, but that is part of that.
Great. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Steve?
Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Steve, just on Riverview, I mean, that street's pretty torn up too. Is that suitable for a slurry seal, or is that?
That's why there's portions that we're going to dig up that are alligatored right now, and you know, most of it is suitable for slurry seal. There's certainly some pockets that aren't.
Okay.
You know, if we had lots of money to put into pavement, I probably would want to overlay it, but I think a slurry seal will give us another 5 to 10 years on that street without any problem.
Yeah, and where are we with Fanmar?
Fanmar is similar to Monterey. It's scheduled for, I think it's 2015 at this point. But like I said, I'll be bringing back a schedule of projects, and we can talk about priorities at that time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead.
Just a quick question on what's going on Park. Is that project on?
That project is on schedule. They're due to actually be done putting pipes in the ground and backfilling and all that by the middle of May, I believe, and should have it buttoned up by the end of May. And then they are going to do a slurry seal in the beginning, probably about the same time, beginning of June, on the portions of Park Avenue that they've touched.
Would that be from Monterey to?
Goes from Monterey to, I can't say it's Wesley or Cabrillo,
Okay.
somewhere in that area.
Around that area, okay,
Yes.
and then they're going to slurry that whole
Yeah.
thing. Great, thank you.
Is the slurry cost on their bill?
Yes.
Great.
Any other questions? Then we will, we need to approve the plans and specs and the estimate.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is C, consideration of an ordinance amending Section 18.02.070 of the Capitola Municipal Code pertaining to affordable, or what's called inclusionary housing regulations. This is a first reading, and approve assets limit when calculating income eligibility. Welcome.
Thank you. This item is a proposed amendment to the city's affordable housing ordinance. By way of background, the City Council approved its affordable housing regulations in November 2004, which required the projects with 7 or more units provide at least 15% of the units at low or moderate income households. Projects with fewer than 7 units are required to pay an in lieu fee. There's currently several affordable housing units in sale for the city, which prompted this item before your council tonight. Eligibility to purchase affordable units is currently based solely upon an applicant's income. Recently, the city has been approached by applicants who qualify under the income criteria, but who have had substantial personal assets. It's staff's opinion that the affordable housing ordinance is intended to provide housing opportunities for individuals and families who cannot otherwise afford a market rate unit. Accordingly, staff surveyed surrounding jurisdictions and learned that many others also apply asset limitations to affordable housing units. As proposed, this ordinance amendment would establish an asset limit that is equal to 3 times the income limit. Although this is somewhat higher than the asset limits used by other surrounding jurisdictions, we wanted to ensure that low and moderate income families who had saved resources over the years were not excluded from the program. The amended ordinance would also establish an appeal procedure for applicants to request the city to modify the asset limitation based on an applicant's future earning potential. Finally, this amendment would also remove outdated language from the ordinance as recommended by the city attorney. According to HUD, assets include things such as cash held in bank accounts, stocks and bonds, real estate equity, and monies received for an inheritance, insurance payments, or certain settlements. This slide shows the proposed ordinance amendment with changes highlighted in red. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Sam.
I had a question on the asset limit. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Good job on your first presentation.
Thank you.
It was a softball.
I know.
Right.
Yeah. We haven't got to the tempest yet. But I did want to ask about the asset limit. I mean, you indicated that we're a little bit higher because of not restricting purchasers' ability to use the assets for the purpose of the housing. But under the proposed change under Section B, it says the assets to be used to purchase the affordable unit are excluded from the asset calculation. So I mean, if you have that sentence excluding it, is it really necessary, or why is it necessary to have a higher asset limit than our neighboring or other jurisdictions?
I believe that sentence is intended to say that if you cash out, say, stocks or bonds to purchase the unit, then it's not double counted. You don't then use that money that there was expended to purchase a unit to disqualify somebody because they had assets in the bank that were used to purchase the unit.
And
But
in
isn't that
defense
the-
of the asset limit a little bit, because it was developed and the staff report was written before Rich actually was employed at the city, we did a fair amount of research in looking at other jurisdictions, and the Santa Cruz limit, they have various different asset limits based on when the units were developed. and some of their asset limits, I believe, for the more recently built affordable units are actually higher than the base of 1 times. And we had a fair amount of discussion internally of what was the right level, and frankly, it's a policy call. I think that my experience, I've been on the end of certifying people for affordable housing for a number of years, both here in Capitola and in Santa Barbara before, and invariably you see virtually every story. And for example, we will get applications from somebody who is clearly at retirement age, probably just starting to draw Social Security, who may have, say, 2 times the income limit, which for a family of, could be $180,000, very little income earning potential for the remainder of their life. And it's difficult to see how someone like that, you wouldn't want to qualify for your unit potentially. So we had a lot of debate internally, and we ended up at thinking at a value of 3 times the limit was the best spot. But I think that there's a sound policy argument for a lower level than with the appeal process, where it could be raised based on someone's specific foot conditions.
How much higher are we than this number than the other jurisdictions?
This slide shows the surrounding jurisdictions that were surveyed and what their criteria are.
So for example, with the city of Santa Cruz, basically you've got up to 1 times your annual income, and then after that they start multiplying it times 8%. So for example, if you had $100,000 over the asset limit, the 1 times, you'd get $80,000 of income attributable so that becomes sort of de facto. Basically, it's de facto about 2 times the income limit.
Okay.
As an approximation.
Any other questions, Sam?
No.
Dennis.
I was intimately involved with the inclusionary housing program when it came to Santa Cruz. Capitola. I pushed that. But it was always my understanding that what we were developing was actually like a first-time buyers program. I never thought of it, and I'm not saying that they should be excluded, but I never thought of someone coming into retirement age and having assets and coming back and buying an inclusionary unit. I don't think that was really ever the intent of the program. I think the intent of the program was a young family, give them an opportunity to live in Capitola, that we could help in giving them affordable unit in our community. And so maybe this has taken a little different direction than what it has, but I really don't feel Santa Cruz's criteria is that bad. When we start going up to $340,000 in assets, that's significant. That's not average. That's not the average household in this community. It's above medium income. So I think the discussion maybe should go a little farther in saying what is the intent of our inclusionary ordinance? Who are we really trying to gear to? Who are we trying to get in these houses, and how can we get the most people in there that are least affordable?
By way of background, we had several applicants, as Rich mentioned, who had significant assets approaching $1 million, and as staff, we were put in the position of denying their application, although they didn't have any discernible income, simply by stating that it didn't meet the intent of the ordinance. And so the reason we brought this forward is to provide, I think the council would agree that someone with $1 million is probably not the intended target for these units, but trying to provide a little bit more of a framework. Where is that threshold? And I think Councilmember Norton raises a valid point, is that there's certainly a public policy. We can decide the asset limit is anywhere. And there's certainly a public policy argument that this isn't intended to be a senior housing project. These are intended to be for younger working families, in which case a lower asset threshold may be appropriate. It really does come down to a policy call. And, I think my suggestion would be that the appeals process is a good one. Having done affordable housing for a while and seen virtually everything, I know one thing is that I haven't seen everything, that invariably some situation gets thrown at you, and if you write your rules up, you want to be able to bend them somehow. And being able to have the appeals committee, I think, is a good one, and having a sort of a standing body with the mayor at the table, especially because it's confidential information that people are disclosing. But that said, I think that, drawing the line at 1 times the income limit, 2 times, 3 times, I think there's a solid public policy argument for any of them. And I think that the value for our standpoint is just drawing that line so that we know as staff when we're denying someone what criteria we're using.
Can I just to follow up, if I may, what assets limits have we been seeing that applicants have, excluding the $1 million asset holder?
Several of those have contacted me, and they're all up in that range. I think that what that does is it removes available low-income housing from the market.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking about, Mike, because if we have a higher limit, we may not, and if we're using those resources at that level, we may not be able to touch the people that really need it.
Exactly.
And that we should maybe try to maintain a lower asset limit so that it really goes to the heart of the folks that we want to be able to help. And also with the language that assets used to purchase the affordable unit are excluded from the calculation in any event. And then there's the appeal mechanism if somebody with maybe just over the line wants to be reconsidered. So I think all those reasons support maybe looking at a more reduced asset limit.
I was going to make the opposite argument. I think that the asset limit is perfect because it does in fact preclude people with over 380, 220 to 380 from coming into the program. And at first I was hardcore enough to say, why would we even have an appeals process? But that speaks to someone who maybe has those assets and maybe has mitigating circumstances. But if you think back to a young family or to someone not making as much, the prospect of having $200,000 or $300,000 in assets is ludicrous.
It's out of the question.
Right.
That's why most applicants are probably going to be much lower than that.
Correct. But we get a significant amount of people who are getting ready to retire from somewhere else, who liquidate and have substantial assets, 6 and 7 figures, and look at a place, and they may not even realize they're low income, but still want to buy it, and we have to hold them off and say, no, this is a stock of housing that we have set aside. So I am very much in favor of the staff's recommendation in view of the fact that there's an appeal process.
I think we should go back to what Dennis was saying, back to our history and why we set this up and who it was for.
Right.
And we need to really revisit that because we don't have that many units.
Well, this speaks to that by getting people who are in a more stable economic position and not letting them take the stock that we're holding for just the people that you're talking about, Dennis, that want it. So like I said, I think that speaks in favor of the staff recommendation.
Well, I'm finding the staff recommendation awful high, Mike.
Well, no. If I'm not understanding, maybe I'm not understanding the staff recommendation. You're saying if someone has assets of $200,000 or $300,000, then they are not able to participate in the program.
No, they would be able.
They would be.
They would
If
be.
they're beyond, it's a threshold. So if you're over that amount, you wouldn't be able to participate.
Correct.
So I think for purposes
you're saying we should make it if somebody has $150,000 in assets.
Well,
okay.
That's
Well, I'm just going towards the fact that we have nothing now and put something in place.
Right.
Staff
There's
a number.
There's a number.
And that's my recommendation. Number one is that I think that this is a very good amendment, and whether it's 1, 2, or 3 times, I think is a policy call, and I think that there's pros and cons of each one of those different numbers. But my recommendation is to pick a number and let's get it codified.
And even though they might have, $250,000 in CDs there, and they're not making any interest on it, that wasn't our target audience. Our target audience were young families that could save enough money for a down payment and be able to make the payment and be able to have a home. And yes, they're not going to be able to sell it and have a whole lot of equity to move on, but at least they have a home in Capitola.
I can make a motion that I'd like to send.
It's public hearing.
And Ed, our main man here, has.
Oh, sorry.
Just a quick comment. 'Cause I'm trying to figure out who our target audience is. Is this the retired person selling their home, coming in with a lump of $300,000 and wanting to buy a home, or is our target audience the young family that we're going to look more at their income scale? Personally, I go along with what Dennis said in the beginning. And that is, we're trying to address people. When somebody's got all this money, I'm thinking affordable housing. It's like it doesn't work for me. Okay, this isn't the goal. So, like I said to Mike, there is a number that we're going to have to come up with, but I wish I had some guidance or a little help from you guys, and that is, Is this targeting the person with the income or with the asset, the retired or the young family? And if that's what we're after, we need to, kind of customize it to that.
And for clarification, Rich, the money, if they're bringing in this $300,000 and they're using it to purchase the unit, then that's no longer part of their assets, or it is? There's some language about if you're using.
Yeah, that money would be excluded if it's used to purchase the unit.
Any number you want to hit is fine, because if they come in with a pile and they buy a house with that pile and they still have a pile.
Let's open the public hearing first. This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to say anything? Or Carolyn, would you like to offer anything to clarify this issue? You've worked on this. We really appreciate it. It's an important
Hi, I'm
topic.
Carolyn Flynn. Many of you have seen my name over the years, so I've been helping on this. I just wanted to add that income certification issues come up often also with the mobile home parks that the city has affordable housing in. So we would likely use this same decision that's made tonight when income certification decisions are made when someone's going to move into Loma Vista and that person needs to be at 120% of median income. When they move into Wharf Road, that person or household needs to be median income or lower. Turner Lane, there are some inclusionary units. Wharf Road, there are some inclusionary units. So those are different household demographic groups. And often people are closer to retirement age. And they maybe don't own a home yet, but they have carefully saved a little bit of money. And when you're a little bit later in life, that stops looking like a huge pile of money. So that's just to say that's part of the thinking behind trying to make it so that we're not having to always make exceptions because this person really is a reasonable or a good possibility. So even though this is generally about amending the ordinance, there are other places where we need to make income certification decisions that this would also, I imagine, apply to. We want to have the same assets limit. So just wanted to add that as an extra.
That's a really good point. You have somebody that's getting ready to retire and they have, $150,000 maybe. Unfortunately, they're going to be using that up for their medical bills. As people, they may have pretty good coverage, but then they get more illnesses, and then you end up using some of that money. So it's pretty scary not to have much money as you get older. But I still think we should go back to our original goal.
But if we're not using the money they're utilizing to purchase the property, then it becomes more rational to be at maybe 2 times the income.
It's a common practice for people to downsize in their life. If you're downsizing and you're sitting on $200,000 in assets, should you be able to come in and buy into inclusion or subsidized, I'm going to say subsidized housing within a community? That's in Capitola. That could be a common practice. But is your goal to provide for that, or is your goal to provide for this family that just has 2 kids and they want to buy their first home?
Well, both.
And in many communities, they call this program the First-Time Homebuyers Program, and basically the purpose of it is to do that. But that could apply to mobile home parks. It's just a wording phrase. So I would like to recommend to send this back to Carol and Rich, and let them look at a real clear definition of what is our definition of inclusionary housing in this prospect, and also to give us a recommendation that reduces down from what we see here as a recommendation, closer to what maybe the city of Santa Cruz or something that's reasonable in that line. Maybe just give us a couple alternatives on that.
Could we not start by just amending this to the city of Santa Cruz's threshold and then study on from there? I'd like to see something.
We don't want various asset limits depending on the project. We want simple goals. Theirs is hard to work with because of this project. It's that.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just the threshold. Could this body right now say, 1.5 times the annual income will be the current threshold, just so we have a threshold? Because we've all, I don't know if you have, but I've been fielding several.
1.5 times. I'm comfortable with that. That's pretty low for almost anyone that's in retirement.
Right. With cash, apart from the money they're using to buy the house, make that the threshold now. And if we see it, we can always amend this. But I'd like to get something on the books now.
Well, asking Rich, what kind of timetable would it be to come back with something for us?
We certainly could come back. My recommendation would be to as Councilmember Termini said, is let's just get a threshold. We do have the appeals process if you are lower, and if it turns out that the appeals committee is meeting and frequently adjusting people's asset limits upwards, then we may want to return and revisit this down the road. But it seems to me that
Let's start at the low end, and then we can always reevaluate it.
Can I ask, do you think 1.5 time is going to make a viable program? Will it work? I assume that's the only reason to give staff an opportunity to maybe go back and think about the question before we just rush and throw something out there. Because we are speaking rather arbitrarily, 1.5, 2, 3.
Right. My only concern would be at the mobile home parks if we ended up in a situation where it was just difficult to find predominantly older buyers, and the committee was meeting fairly often to review applications and make exceptions, because you're looking at somebody that maybe has $150,000 of assets and is on Social Security and is 68 years old. And I think in that case, given where we are right now in this process, I think as Michael says, getting it on the books, seeing how it goes, picking a number, and then if we need to make an adjustment, it's virtually the same as continuing it, because it gives us a chance to make a.
It's the only way we're going to get a good reading.
Okay, I'll move the staff recommendation.
I have a motion on the floor.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me.
My concern is not just the income amount. My concern is the definition of the program. It's not real clear. Who are we trying to serve here? I'd like to clarify what we're trying to do here, what part of the community we're serving to. Then it would be easier to identify the amounts. I'm okay to set some kind of a limit at this time and move it forward, but the point is I'd still like staff to come back and give us a clear definition of the ordinance. Who are we serving?
I think we need to tell them
We
what
can
we
always
want.
do that.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to do now is give staff a tool that they haven't had up till now, and we'll be able to gauge it by how often the appeal committee has to meet, or if they have to meet at all. If staff has something to open up, they can certainly come back and review and give us more verbiage to state our purpose. But I think right now they're looking for a tool to refer to because they've had some sticky situations in the last 6 months.
Okay. I'm not sure what 1.5 times means. It sounds right, but I don't know how that works across the board.
It's half the threshold that they've recommended.
Madam Mayor?
It would be 1.5 time of the income limit.
Correct.
For that family size. Yeah. Starting, so.
Before he makes a motion, Dennis, before I make a motion, just a quick comment, because I think I understand now. We're addressing two different types of people. It could be, the goal is the affordable housing, and I see the working couple that has maybe some kind of income, the one we're trying to adjust now, whether it's 1.5 or 2, and they have no assets, they have no cash, and we're trying to get them into a home. But if we've got these mobile homes, this is typically going to be filled by senior citizens who have a reserve of cash and really no income. They're not going to meet the criteria. So if you're going to make a motion to direct them to come back, it's going to have two different kinds of criteria. One is for the young family, which we're going to allow them to have 1 or 2 or whatever that number is. And the other one, we may allow $300,000 in assets because they don't have any monthly income. They're going to come in and buy the place cash and live there, and that's it.
Well, they have their Social Security.
Right, and that's what they're going to live off of. But the cash they have, if I'm reading this right, does not count against them. If they have that,
the cash they have to buy the house is not counting against them as assets. Okay, so we could set those limits low. They don't need to be $300,000, because if they had $300,000 in cash and that's what they're going to buy the home with, that's not even going to be reported. Correct? So if we say it can be 300, we're essentially saying you can have the 300 to buy the house and 300 in the bank, and you can get our affordable housing. And I don't think that's what we want.
It's not.
And also, there's a lot of young families that buy in mobile homes parks. We've seen that trend over the
Stephanie's
years.
point, again, making it half of the staff recommendation brings it down, but it also accounts for, like you said, the reserves for potential senior citizens medical reserve. So.
Okay, I can live with that.
I think we're going to have to try it and see how it goes.
Did you make a motion?
I did, but you guys helped me modify it a bit.
Okay.
So, want me to go back into it?
Yeah.
We use the income standards then as 1.5 times the income, the income standards, and we'll go ahead and we'll pass it into the ordinance here. But I also direct the staff to look at what this ordinance does and what we intended to do and what it's encompassing, and come back to us at a future date.
I'll second that.
And we should also give them suggestions for what we want there, because that's our goals that we've had in the past for affordable housing.
Okay.
And so we can also work on that ourselves.
And before we vote, could I ask, when the staff comes back, my understanding that over the years and recently, the first-time homebuyer program was really not functioning because of the values in Capitola. Now, I don't know, maybe that's changed, but I'd like maybe staff to come back with us with a review of that, about the status of that, and whether it's practical with the home prices and the first-time assistance that we're providing. So thank you. With that, yeah, I'll support the motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is council and staff communications.
I do want to let the council know that, well, obviously we received some good news in our settlement with Lexington Insurance Company this week. We did receive some bad news in that the Department of Finance rejected our appeal. They were sought to claw back $50,000 of payments that were made to city RDA loans from a period of time before the legislation at the state was adopted dissolving redevelopment agencies. I reported to the council previously that I went to Sacramento and had received preliminary indications from staff at the Department of Finance that they would potentially reverse their decision. They did not, and we made the payments to the auditor controller today as required. So unfortunately, that was another $50,000 hit in the wrong direction.
What's the status on the Rispin?
The status on the Rispin is that we still don't know. I understand that the State Controller's Office is conducting a two-step audit process for all of the RDAs around the state. That's about 400 redevelopment. I understand they've committed to completing the first stage of their audit process in 2013 calendar year. The first stage is just going to look at what happened, what the RDAs have done since the legislation was adopted. So that would be in June of 2011, I believe. And then they're going to do their second stage, presumably in 2014, of looking back. The bad news for us is that we transferred the Rispin property both before and after after the redevelopment agency legislation was adopted. So, yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. You know, at this point, it's our property. Whether the state controller does seek to claw it back is anyone's guess at this point.
Is there a limitation period on when they can take further action on this?
Forever?
You know, I haven't seen any sort of statute of limitations. I mean, I'll be honest with you. The $50,000 to me is pretty bizarre. You know, these were payments that the city had made for virtually a generation before, and you know, I'm not sure what their story is. It may be something to consider legal action down the road, but at this point, I think it's probably not warranted, and there's no statute of limitations we're running up against.
Any possibility, any suggestion that we use any political help on this, or is this just that's not going to probably help?
I'll tell you, I've been at a number of functions over the last 6 to 8 months with our elected leaders in Sacramento, and I'll tell you that every single city council person, as soon as they get in front of Mark Stone or Bill Monning or anybody else, just starts beating them with the redevelopment hammer. And how could you have done this to us? Department of Finance is not behaving appropriately, and I'll tell you, we're all telling them that, and it doesn't seem to be having a big impact.
Dennis.
Can we put the benches back on the picnic bench at Perry Park?
No.
No?
Not until we put lights in Perry Park.
Because
when we put the picnic benches back on, the chief's going to have another headache.
We will be actually. I've asked the Public Works Director to schedule that. We need to make a decision about that. The in-between state that we're in right now isn't terrific, so we would like to come back and make a decision about whether the benches are going to remain or whether they're going to come off. We're hoping to do that in the next couple meetings.
Well, we could just take the term park away from it. It won't be a park, and then we won't have to worry about putting the benches there at all.
We don't have benches in all of our parks.
You're right. We don't have them at the Rispin.
But Rispin should have benches.
Yes.
Maybe the chief wants to tell us what he'd like to do. You want to do benches, chief, or you want no benches?
I actually have one other announcement.
Okay, announcements.
This Saturday, the police department is participating in the drug take-back program. It's a national program where people can turn in their prescription drugs, and we'll take those in front of the police department from 10 in the morning till 2. And also, we were the recipients, along with all the law enforcement agencies in the county, of gift bags that Twin Lakes Church put together. They had hundreds of volunteers, and they received donations, and they put together nice gift bags, and so we want to thank them and their congregation for all their support.
You going to write them a letter, or do you want me to write them a letter?
If you would like, or we actually put it on our Facebook page thanking them as well, and also noticing the drug turn-in program as well.
Great, thank you. Treasurer's comments. Other staff or council comments? Ed?
I do, yeah. I would like to get the approval of the council to make a couple recommendations or direct the Parking and Traffic Commission to do a couple items for us. I'll read the 2 items. One is I would like them to explore, analyze, and recommend for pay station expansion to the following streets: Cherry, San Jose, California, Park, Stockton, and Capitol Avenue from the Trestle to Monterey. And number 2 is I'd like them to research and make recommendations for parking time period changes and rate increases and decreases in the following areas: the Village area referred to as A, Cliff Drive referred to as A1, and Upper and Lower Pacific Cove referred to as Area B.
Yes.
You want what? You want to?
I think we asked them to do that already, but we didn't.
Well, just one pay stations on Park Avenue.
Cherry, San Jose, California, Park, Stockton, and Capitol Avenue.
Park doesn't have that many.
Park doesn't have any meters.
It doesn't have any.
Park Place.
Park Place. Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Didn't we already look at this?
No, but we told that we asked staff, but we didn't formally ask the parking commission.
This was looked at a long time ago for meters. This is for pay stations.
Okay.
Which changes a lot of the criteria.
It does, yeah.
And is this to generate revenue, or is it to deal with employee parking there, or
This is to generate revenue and to open up the space for residents there, so it does not become employee parking.
But aren't there a lot of vacation rentals there, and do they all have parking permits?
Normally, when I survey that area of the 44 parking places, it normally has 8 cars with permits, and the rest are all regular cars parking, free parking. I'd just like them to look at it. It's just for them to do research and make a presentation to us. That's all I'm asking.
Well, and they're free to select their own top agenda items to make recommendations about. I mean, so.
They are, but I think they are sensitive to, if they get an assignment from the city council, they take it seriously, so.
That would be the intent.
Good idea.
And we can grade them.
Okay.
I just don't like all those signs and machines around town. It just makes it look so industrial, so.
Well,
I'm happy.
Can't we start taking away some of the ones that are on the old parking meters? Are we going to start eliminating
Yeah,
those?
Steve has a program going to eliminate them.
They're working on that.
I mean, I don't have anything against them, but just all the visual clutter that we have with having all these machines everywhere in the village. So that's my only concern about it.
And Madam Mayor, I'm sad to report that there's no joy in Mudville. The Warriors lost tonight.
Oh, what was the score?
It's irrelevant, and the really sad thing is they lost to some guys from Texas. So it's
really bad.
Okay, thank you all very much. We're adjourned. Thanks for all of your good work.